Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. And inshallah, we will start our session now. And this is our third session. And the title of session is Asabiyyah, Power and the City. And we have 4 presentations in this session, inshallah. And we will continue according to the order on the program. And our first paper presenter is Abdullah al-Bayyari. He's joining us from Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, which is located in Doha and Jordan. And the title of his presentation is On Civic Tribalism and the Death of the City Text. The floor is yours, Professor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for putting me at the beginning, because at the beginning I need to grasp as much attention as I should be. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. My paper is called in Arabic عشائرية المدن وموت المدينة النص. It's called tribalism, civic tribalism. I want to let you know something at the beginning about my background in order to conduct the concept of my paper so you can comprehend the whole idea. I came from different disciplines. Originally, I'm a dentist. I studied cultural anthropology. I participated in war zones. And I proceeded to political theory, then comparative literature. I deal with cities as, you don't hear me. I deal with cities as they are texts. Let me introduce you to something a little bit important. There's a saying, oh, I didn't translate it. It says in Arabic, المكان فكرة في عقل أحدهم. It is by Hussein al-Barghouthi, a Palestinian poet. المكان فكرة في عقل أحدهم, it means a place is someone's idea. It is an idea in someone's mind. In order to comprehend the rest of the research, you need to imagine this space, any city you have ever lived in, as if it is an idea in someone's mind. So you are moving in someone's mind, being subjected to his imagination, his memory, and when I say someone's mind, I'm not talking about person only, I'm talking about authority, centrisms, Western and Eastern centrisms. And eventually, this is part of the dialogue between us and our cities. Ibn Khaldun says in his al-Muqaddimah, الإنسان, and I will translate, الإنسان مدني بالطبع أي لا بد له من الاجتماع الذي هو المدينة وهو معنى العمران. I translate, my translation for this quote is as follows. Human being is social by nature, and human being must be living in society, and this is the core essence of Umran. In order to live in Umran, according to Ibn Khaldun, there must be 2 identities for the human being in this Umran, in this city. First one is Umran identity, al-Hawiyya al-Umraniyya. Second one is rational identity, al-Hawiyya al-Aqliyya. Hawiyya al-Umraniyya, it means the meaning and the values we, human beings, get from living in groups. The value system, the meaning system, symbols, and whatsoever. And al-Hawiyya al-Aqliyya is how to, as Dr. Abdelaziz said before in the session before, to فسيروا في الأرض, إنه نبحث, search, analyze, study nations before us. Those are the 2 identities every city must supply us as civic individuals in order to have this dialogue between us and the city. In order to have those 2 identities, 2 essential things we must do in a city. First one is communication. Second, communication is al-ittisal. Second thing is al-haraka. Al-ittisal, according to Ibn Khaldun, it means al-istikhlaf fil ard. God created us in order to nu'ammir hadhihi al-ard, to build, to increase the meaning. It's not about economic, it's not about wealth, it's not about power, it's about the value and the meaning of being a human being living on earth. This is al-ittisal. We are connected to a superior reason of existence, which is God. Second thing is al-haraka. Al-haraka, it means changing, it means detection, it means studying, it means building on earth. According to this intro, I may say that cities must gives us space for two things: communication, al-ittisal, this value and meaning space, symbolic space for us to communicate with the greater reason for us to be here, and the lower reason, and space to move, space to study, space to produce, space to work on civilization, as Dr. Hallaq said. So there must be an other in this relationship within the city. Dealing with the city as if it's a text, I may borrow a theory from Henry Lefebvre, from his book, The Production of Space, telling us that in order to have this kind of communication between ourselves and the city as a text, we need to do, we will experience three things. First is the imagined space, the perceived space, and the lived space. In Arabic, al-makan al-mutakhayyal, how can we imagine this city? Al-makan al-mu'ash, how can we live in this city? And the perceived one, al-makan al-mudrak, how can we perceive this city? Those three aspects is mainly the dramatic source of this relationship, keep on changing relationship between us and our cities. How we perceive it, how we imagine it, and how we really, in our daily life, live it. This is actually the dialogue between us and our cities. Let's take an example. The first example is the Palestinian context. I'm originally Palestinian. When I talk about Palestine, there is a geography dilemma for Palestinians, because Palestine is occupied. A little bit of it supposed to be liberated, which is not. And the rest is under continuous assault by the Israeli military. Let's take the first one, the liberated one, Ramallah. The picture above is from a neighbor in Ramallah called Rawabi, for you whoever's been there. Ramallah is built totally under Palestinian Authority. Second thing, it is by Palestinian capital, between brackets. Third thing, it is on what's so-called liberated Palestinian city, which is Ramallah. So this is supposed to be totally Palestinian. While the other one below it, it's called Beit El. Beit El, it's an Israeli colony. Can you see the resemblance between building? In case one, this is how the Palestinian under peace negotiations can imagine his house. It is totally the same as the Israeli colony. I guess the Palestinian cannot imagine how to live in their, not all Palestinians, sure. Palestinians who went through and who believed in peace accords with Israelis, they cannot imagine how to live and how to build their city without imagining how the Israelis build their cities. Let's take another example. I think you know all this. You know all, what is this? This is the amphitheater in Rome. Why Rome? Why talking about Rome while we are talking about Gaza? Palestine. This is the map of Gaza. I need you to relate between this picture and this one. Let's talk a little bit about Israeli, how they perceive themselves. There is a constant propaganda in Israeli media says that we are the only Western European light of democracy and civilization in an area full of savages and full of cannibals, full of every single picture borrowed from imperial history or imperial narrative. They imagine themselves as the core of or the representation of the Greek civilization in this area. So when they speak about civilization, they recall the Greek civilization, which is supposed to be, from Western point of view, it is the source of the human civilization. It's the, as Fukuyama says in End of History, it is the only picture of civilization in the world. So what? Every single war in 2009 and 2013 and a couple of weeks ago, initiated by the Israelis upon Gaza, they are dealing with Gaza as if it's a city, and they have this amphitheater. Israeli warcraft always put fire on Gaza from outside. It's the same as the emperor in the Greek and Romanian history used to wave his hand, let the lions in, lets the entertainment begin, and then he is not in direct confrontation with the subject. He's just witnessing, as entertained by this. One of the most amazing ways that resistance in Gaza decoded this imaginary text of the city, of Gaza city, is the tunnels beneath the amphitheater. They got under the amphitheater, so they totally decoded the imaginary office space the Israeli imposed over the Palestinians in Gaza. So, to cut it short, imagining a city or imagining a space is mainly about power, is mainly about how to impose power. And this, by the way, was the simplest manifestation. Let's look at this one. Sorry, not Cairo, not yet. What do you think about this one? Supposed to be just a cube. Actually, this picture was taken in Jaffa, my city, in Jaffa, in the Arab neighbor in Jaffa. Okay, it's not in the Jewish one, in the Arab. This is supposed to be a kind of aesthetic tool to put it in a space. Actually, this is put by Ministry of Defense in order to prevent Palestinians from running by cars through Israeli soldiers. It's a defense. In that case, transportation is in this picture is actually a war zone. It's not about civic aesthetic tools. It's about war. There is someone here telling you that there is an enemy. There is no other in this text called Palestine. There is only Jewish. There is no other in this text. Let's take another example, which is Cairo. Any one of you have ever been to Cairo? You would directly see this picture. This is a kind of narrative for Cairo. This is a capital narrative, prestigious. We can say it's. This is what supposed to be the official Cairo that bring investment. But if you turn this narrative, you would see this one. In Cairo, you can easily see layers of narrative put over the story, that you are supposed to see only one, which is this one. And by the way, while we are talking here, couple of weeks ago, the government totally demolished this neighborhood. Why? Because this neighborhood causes a kind of disturbance to the elite, to the businessmen who established this thing. And by the way, as an Egyptian, I'm also an Egyptian, I cannot stay in front of this magnificent tower more than 5 minutes, or else a policeman comes. What are you doing here? Let me check. Open your bag. What's it do? Because I'm not, this kind of narrative is not to me. Let's take another example. Damascus. If you logged on Google Map nowadays in Damascus, you would see Hajjaz Wazarat al-Naft, a barricade, a military barricade on Google Map. So this narrative regarding cities, it is now official that it is exported to Google Map. When you go to want to see your house, if you are someone who's living in Damascus and you want to Google Map your house, you would search for barricades, military barricades, 1, 2, 3, surrounding a green area. How can we be part of a city narrative? I would refer you to a little bit to my study of literature. In order to read the novel and you want to be part of, or you would feel that you are part of this narrative, 3 main things must be there. First, التماهي. التماهي it's like mirror identification. For example, if I'm reading a novel and there is a character in this novel that represents lots of things in my character, this is identification. هذا هو التماهي. What do we identify ourselves with in our cities? You would amazingly, there is a statistics made in an American university in Cairo, 2013, that most of the youth in this case study, most of the youth between 18 and 27, they don't see themselves in their own cities, despite the fact that they emerge from areas or neighbors, like for example, Heliopolis, which is supposed to be prestigious and very old neighbor in Cairo. They don't self-identify themselves with the city. Second thing, okay, even before that I would finish. Efficiency, how efficient you are in your city. Third thing is the right to narrate. Do you have your own story, your own version of your city? Although the 3 elements accentuated in one very essential moment in Arabic cities, which are revolution. In Cairo, for example, in Damascus, in every single city, people retrieved their right in their cities as if cities are text. I have the right to be part of its history, to be part of its plot, if it's a narrative, like this one. And I'm not talking only about revolution. I would talk about something else which is also related to accumulation of retrieving back what is ours in our city. Like this, for example, and this one. It's also in Egypt. This is retrieving back what it is our right in the city. Before ending with this picture, I want to refer about, it's just pumped into my mind even before the 5 minutes. Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, this is the capital of Saudi Arabia. You will rarely find terraces on houses. Why? Because there is a very sharp, distinctive differentiation line between public and private. Windows are just as this size. Walls are even higher than these walls. Fences Why? Because there is a kind of narrative that totally separates between private and between public. Also between genderly, between male and female, between who are you and who is me, regarding being a citizen. Eventually, before the 1 minute Dr. Ramazan is drawing, this picture represents a scene or a one night story in 1001 Night. It is called a city on a whale, Medina ala ظهر الحوت. This city is supposed to emerge every 100 years, and the whale goes down. I want to leave you with a question that I hope this question would trigger the whole basic concept of cities or of my paper. What if one day you woke up in the morning and you would find your city that you believed in for hundreds of years, and you would believe that your son and your daughter will live in, is gone? There is no history, there is no... What would you do? Thank you.
I will have questions after the panel, and please keep in mind, and if there are any shy people among the audience, you can just write your questions in a piece of paper and hand it to me if you are shy to ask. And please don't forget your questions. And our second presenter is Professor Hiba Rauf Ezzat. She is a faculty member at İBN HALDUN University at the Department of Political Science and International Relations. And the title of her paper is Armies as Tribes on Postmodern Military Asabiyyah and the Future of Civility. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your patience and coming after lunch. Usually people start like napping. So I want to first thank Professor Ramadan, not for heading the session, but actually for inviting me to teach on Ibn Khaldun and contemporary sociology. And this was a course that I taught till now for 3 times at the university for last 3 semesters. And though I was interested in Ibn Khaldun for a long time, and I also was interested in social theory for a long time, but this was the first time I'm teaching Ibn Khaldun in relation to contemporary sociology. And I see in the audience the faces of some of my students who attended this class, and I actually want to thank them and dedicate that work to them, because our discussions and our debates and their seriousness in the course helped me a lot develop some of my ideas. The idea is very simple, and it actually, I started thinking about the topic in 2011, when we had in Egypt the uprising or the revolution, whatever you call it, during the Arab Spring, if it is a spring. And I started realizing that we have a very strong tribal presence in the on the Egyptian scene. And I'm the girl of an urban family, so I was not very much aware of what happens outside the capital. But then when I started traveling in the country after the revolution, I realized that we have a very strong tribal component. Usually we were told that Egypt is not like Syria and Iraq. We are one nation. We have been like this for a long time. And we don't have the issues of sectarianism that they have in the ultimate difference is between Muslims and Christians, which is actually not true. The least difference that you can find in Egypt is between Christians and Muslims. If you put aside the construction of conflictual identities, that is actually an outcome of modernization processes. But we have great differences between North and South, between rural, urban, and Bedouin, so there are serious issues. But how our image was constructed about our own self, not only about our own city, is actually very manufactured, very much territorial nation state, not only imported but constructed over a very long time to create this modern Egypt, and also to create, while we are talking, the neo-modern Egypt, which is the Egypt that should build a new capital that looks very much like Dubai, which is very interesting, that we are taking the Dubai examples to build our new capital. There is a new capital now built in Cairo, the new administrative capital that does not have a different name so far. So far, they call it the new administrative capital, but it's important to know that the main road in that capital is named after Mohammed bin Zayed. So it tells you something about a capital in Egypt with that history, while the main road in that city is called after the ruler of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed. So what I wanted to address is actually, through reading Ibn Khaldun, there is a bit of a simplistic image of the Bedouin and the urban. And what was so brilliant about Ibn Khaldun, that he said that there is civility in both, because in our modern narratives, the tribal, the Bedouin is basically primordial, and the city, the urban, is the more civilized in a way. So the Bedouins are sort of backwarded in a way, traditional societies, and the city is the hub of civility and the emergence of civilization and the empires, etc. And he simply said this is not true. This was good enough, but he doesn't have to fit to our own categories. This is something that we learn in the course of time, that the imaginary of Ibn Khaldun does not have to be our imagery in the third millennium. So we have to think in a different way to understand how he imagined the world. But also, when he was talking about the military and the civil, in a way, they were very much linked. Civility is about human society. It's about the nature of society, the mode of civility, not about being civilized or uncivilized. It's about the nature of your civility, the nature you deal with space and place and time, and build your own memory according to your own worldview. So the civil military is not separated as we separate it in modern thinking. So we don't have civil military relations in al-Muqaddimah. It doesn't work this way. It doesn't go like horizontal. So you have the military and the civil, or you have al-mulk, al-ra'iyya. It's not as simple as that only. They all are in a sort of a matrix. So within the city, there is a military component. There is al-jund. There is al-silah. There is those who are al-mustana'in wal-mawali. You have all these different categories in the city. The city is not unarmed. The city also has a military component. But it doesn't look like the military component of post-mortem cities as they were called by Stephen Graham. It's a different melange. It's a different mode of relation between the civil and the military. And that's, at the same time, the tribe is very much present. Asabiyyah, al-Asabiyyah ta'ulu ila al-mulk, or the Asabiyyah leads eventually to seeking of power. You have this power built on the identity, on the tribal affiliation, on the relation that is based on blood kinship, and then it leads to accumulation of power, accumulation of search for glory and search for domination, and then eventually the Bedouin tribes establish a city or inherit a city or fight and win a city. So it depends in the course of history, according to different narratives, how this develops. But actually, when this happens, Asabiyyah either continues, so we have the tribal within the city, and this was the case of not only in the Arab world, the cities, it was the case of Athens. Athens had tribes, and the political system was based on the representation of tribes. And this is something we always forget when we talk about democratic citizenship in Athens, that it was based on tribal relations. It was based on tribal checks and balances and relations of power. And at the same time, when Ibn Khaldun describes that when the mulk is established, when the kingdom is established, the dynasty is established, it has to establish rules, and it has to force people to follow regulations and laws. Otherwise, it would fall apart. So there is that authoritarianism in the first stage, where one person or one tribe takes over power and enforces its authority upon people. And Asabiyyah plays a very important role here. The tribal is still in action while you are establishing a city. But in the course of time, with the existence and the establishment of laws, and when people settle, and there is the dimension of power and of time, in the course of time, Asabiyyah starts fading away in favor of laws. And here he says something very important. He says, people start following the laws without a need for Asabiyyah. So the nature of power and the nature of government changes. People are following the rules regardless of the Asabiyyah. The Asabiyyah starts fading away in a way. And then he says something very interesting that I want to actually read as a paragraph, because in the Arabic language, in Ibn Khaldun, and his language is superb, it's one of the very important and striking paragraphs in Al-Muqaddimah, at least for me in this subject. He says, people find it difficult to submit to large dynastic power at the beginning, because they come from the Bedouin life, and Bedouin life is very decentralized in a way. Even if you have the elder or the person who is leading the tribe, still it's like more of a circle rather than a pyramid in a way. So the new government is something strange for them. Settling and then having these structures and establishing institutions, this is all new. But once leadership is firmly vested in the members of the family qualified to exercise royal authority in the dynasty, and once royal authority has been passed on by inheritance over many generations, and through successive dynasties, the beginnings are forgotten. You have now a new generation of quote-unquote members of that city, citizens of that place, who forgot what it was all about. They came to the world and the system was functioning. So the beginnings were forgotten, and the members of that family are clearly marked as leaders. It has become a firmly established article of faith that one must be subservient and submissive to them. People will fight with them in their behalf as they would fight for the articles of faith. And here he says a sentence in Arabic that is extremely difficult to translate because it's so poetic. You know, he says, وَرَسَخَ فِي الْعَقَائِدِ دِينُ الْإِنْقِيَادِ. And in the articles of faith, now the submission is rooted. So people fight to defend the dynasties as they would fight to defend their own faith. And this is very interesting, how living in the city basically changes the perception of who you are and what you are supposed to be fighting for. Especially if we add to it that he said that Asabiyyah does not function alone at the beginning of establishing a city, but it has to be put on an apparatus of religion and faith. This simply means that when Asabiyyah needed faith, faith was respected. But when the system and when the political establishment was rooted, Asabiyyah became faith. And this sounds very much like nationalism. You know, the faith of the religion of nationalism. Sometimes I listen to people when they are promoting the system, for example, in Egypt, where I come from. And it's not about where I stand politically, it doesn't really matter. But the way they talk in confidence about the ruler and how he is protecting them and how they should be sacrificing and how what he says is complete truth and how he has saved them from hell, not to be like, again, Iraq and Syria, you know. And I feel like as if they're talking about God, you know. It's like this sense of becoming, the state becoming an article of faith. The platform, the stage, the theater for this is actually the city. And this affects very much our understanding of the urban in our modern times. The tribes persist in modern sociology, and of course, Ibn Khaldun teaches us a lot about tribes and how tribes are important, but we learned in the course of time that tribes will eventually fade away. This is the modern thinking that all affiliations like religion, like tribal affiliations, ethnicities, when you become a citizen of the modern city, of the modern territorial state, you will forget all about that. You have to seek your own individual freedom, self-realization, etc., and you don't need all these sort of platforms anymore. You are an individual, you're a citizen. But actually what happens is that the military wins over the civil, if we are talking about civil-military relations in modern cities. And what struck me is that when we were reading about armies, when we were reading about elites, when we were reading about ideological party politics, somehow, because I was reading this in different contexts, for different courses, in different circles, attending different seminars in different departments, at one point I started seeing the overlap. So I started realizing, oh, actually our military is acting like a tribe. Because tribes, what is a tribe about? I mean, we have so much literature about what is a tribe under that title. A tribe is a group of people related to each other by kinship relations. Put this aside. They can be professional relations, they can be whatever interest relations, money relations, you know. So we can assume new forms of tribes. And this is the new trend in anthropology to basically liberate the semantic field of the concept from its limited space and trying to extend it a little bit. Something we call in conceptual analysis, because my background is political theory and conceptual analysis, stretching. So you want to stretch the notion of the tribe to include new forms of institutions that were supposed to be modernist, rationalist, but they're not acting so. So why should on earth be there a military city where the American army establishes neighborhoods and spaces and services for the families of the army members, for the soldiers? So they cluster and live together. There is not a different language, but there is that language of patriotism, that we are the ones who are sacrificing for the country. And I noticed after 2013, when we had the coup, that most of those on social media who come from a military or police background started calling the revolutionaries faggots. Faggot means in the English street language, gay, which is not a description of sexuality, by the way. So put aside sexuality in sociology, anthropology, and gender studies, etc. It's just a bad naming on the street, you know? So why were they repeatedly calling them faggots, you know? And then I started realizing, oh, there is that language of that tribe that assumes if you don't carry a gun, you're not a man. So the civil is actually less than the military. If you carry arms, if you are gendarme, if you are people who carry guns, you have more masculinity, and this takes us to Lacan, you know, and these constructions of masculinity, than the civil. And hence, definitely, there would be a tension between both, because this is a group of people who assume that by simply carrying guns, they have more rights. They are more noble, quote unquote, in the cause and in their life, and they should deserve more respect. They should deserve that we obey and we do not contest, basically, their power if they are in the seat of power. This is amazing for me, because these new forms of tribes are actually changing the nature of the city. Of course, this city is becoming more and more globalized as well. So the urban, the military, and the civil are actually also overlapping. And sometimes they divide the city into cantons. So you have, like what Nizar al-Sayyad described, medieval modernity. You have the settlement, the squatters of people just living on their own, you know, usually the lower economic class. And you have the gated communities for the nobles, like in medieval times. And you have the camp, where people, gendarmes, those who carry the guns in the very essence of the meaning in the French language, gendarmes, you know, whether you call them national armies, whether you call them whatever you call them. And interestingly enough, more and more we see on the global level, in the cosmopolitan city, this diversification of emerging tribes, let alone what we are talking about of neo-tribalism now, that people in global nomadism are creating new affiliations, because human beings, even if they are alone, they tend to cluster. They need to feel somehow belonging. And hence we have new tribes that are not the revival of old tribes, which is taking place due to wars, due to alienation, due to immigration, but we also are seeing new forms of tribes of people coming together, and sometimes those people coming together are white supremacists who are defending using guns, or they are kind people who just want to watch football. So, but they are tribes. And hence the civil, the military, the urban, the Bedouin, or the tribal in its new postmodern form are living next to each other. In the middle of that, it's not only that we find on the military side the establishment of military cities, whether they are for training purely for the soldiers, but also military cities for the families of soldiers and officers, etc. But we are witnessing now the militarization of the city by the presence of the military to protect, to control, to maintain order. And this is what we saw in Cairo. And Cairo, there are so many pictures that I would have given you if we just had more time to talk earlier about these walls in Cairo. There is this very famous picture of a wall that was blocking the road from Tahrir Square that was leading to the American University in Cairo. It was a big wall made from big stones to prevent the revolutionaries from going and trying to attack the Ministry of Interior. And what happened, because the city is a text, thank you very much, Abdullah, wallahi, it was great to think about this artistic dimension. The graffiti artists simply drew on the wall what is behind the wall. It's a very famous picture. So you look at the wall as if you are looking through glass. They represented the scene behind the wall on the wall as graffiti. And it was one of the, really, I was giving you my back. I'm very, very sorry. So we are on the same wave in a way. So it's brilliant how this represents how walls, how over-militarization of the space is actually. But people don't stand still. I mean, people at the end rebel. And this is what David Harvey was talking about when he talked about rebel cities. That cities basically react. People, as much as they tend to cluster, they tend to resist. When they see what is going on and they feel they are not happy with being, they also want to become. They want to change their own understanding of the space. And here we are in front of the question of violence. If they resist this militarization, they are accused definitely of being terrorists. And here language plays a very important role. What I think is important in reading Ibn Khaldun, that it is triggering and initiating a very important discussion about what is civil, what is military, what is civility, what is a city. And he had a conversation in our classes with Mumford, with Jacques Ellul, with Stephen Graham, with you name it, with Lefebvre and everyone else. And we kept trying to look here and there and see what is in common and how can modern modes of creating space help us understand Ibn Khaldun more, and how Ibn Khaldun was talking about an age where actually not everything unfolded yet. So we have new forms now of space and military civil relations, and this postmodern urban militarism is heading also towards war zones where we have herbicide, for example. And the last but not least important is actually that armies are building civil cities now, but they are building them a la camps. They look like camps. They are gated. They are for a specific group of people. And this alliance between capitalism and militarism is amazing. And that's why I want to finish by sort of reintroducing Lenin when he said imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Actually, I think that capitalism is the highest stage of imperialism, and this needs another talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hiba. And now we have our next panelist, Raffaello Alberto Ventura. He's joining us from Group of Geopolitical Studies, which is located in Paris. And the title of his presentation is The Struggle for Prestige from Ibn Khaldun to Contemporary Sociology, a General Theory of Diminishing Returns in Symbolic Power. Yes, please.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me there. I learned so many things in this morning and this afternoon. So, since the discovery of the Muqaddimah by Europeans, many insisted on how Ibn Khaldun anticipated some key concepts of Western philosophy, sociology, and economics. But this is rather reductive. if his sole contribution has been the anticipation of concepts now fully absorbed in the contemporary academic knowledge, the study of his very own words at the dawn of the 21st century would just be a matter for historians. Actually, I would like to suggest that Ibn Khaldun may have anticipated concepts yet to be discovered, yet to be developed. He had a strong and still disruptive insight into the relationship between symbolic power and social order. Not only the description of status seeking did clarify the motivation of social actors, particularly at court, but it can serve as a working model in order to explain the breakdown of ruling elites, which is very actual with populism and all the actual subjects. And it does that connecting approaches that contemporary research keep in separated field, such as the sociology of elite, sociology of education, management science, or development economics. As a social philosopher, Ibn Khaldun helped me to connect some dots. And now I will present kind of research which is in course and will become a book. The effects of the struggle for reputation, as depicted in the Muqaddimah, induce an intra-elite competition, as recently developed by Jack Goldstone or Peter Turchin. This conflict takes the form of a non-cooperative strategy to rack up scarce positional goods, symbolic goods, like the prestige, leading the whole society to bear huge unproductive expenditures. Due to the transfer of resources from the creation of value to the reproduction and selection through the jah, the prestige, and I will say more about this concept in Khaldun. This mechanism is similar to the mechanism of job market signaling studied by economists in the 20th century. And in this way, the ruling class weakens to the point of losing performance. In this way, the balance of power between center, Hadara, and periphery, Badawa, is permanently reshaped. So sorry for my pronunciation of Arabic or Arab. I use Ibn Khaldun to reconnect these dots around the concept of Jah. I will show here in the next slide many concepts of Western sociology or philosophy that don't translate Jah. These are not translation. Even in sometimes we use it like translation, prestige, reputation, but fields of study that talk about similar things to those of Ibn Khaldun. So I listed, I can say more, but I won't have the time to list everyone, but you have the status in Max Weber, you have the theme of recognition, which is still very actual after Hegel. Now today is really one of the central concept of social philosophy. You have conspicuous consumption. Professor Kaminsky talked about this morning, prestige and impression management, which is a concept of marketing, presentation of self in Erving Goffman, and symbolic capital, for example, in Bourdieu. And the variety of contemporary social sciences concept engendered many fields of research which are unconnected in most of the cases. And this is a shame, because I think if we connect them, we can understand many things, and in fact connect the reflection about symbol with the reflection about power, which is actually what Ibn Khaldun does. And still, there is not a unifying concept. I will call it Jah. And this is a quotation. I won't read every quotation of Ibn Khaldun, but you can write it. And we can find a clear account of how Jah works. For example, in the theory of market signaling, as I said before, so Michael Spence, American economist, explains, it's a paper from the 70s, he explains how an employer cannot directly observe the real capabilities of a potential employee, so the marginal product he will generate prior to hiring. So what he observes is signs, it says a plethora of personal data in the form of observable characteristics and attributes of the individual. And it's a way to anticipate what will he obtain from this employee. So all the observable characteristics are signal of the real capabilities, as JA is a signal of social status. Of course, signal can also be deceptive if they don't keep their promises. So the reliability of the signaling device today in the job market, for example, the university issuing a diploma, is a guarantee that signal will work as a fair prediction of the employee's performance. Spence considered that signaling explains a considerable variety of market and quasi-market phenomena, but it can also be used to understand the dynamics of power. And so here we come back to the Muqaddimah, when Ibn Khaldun scrutinized the characteristic emblems of royal authority, considered as necessary to the exercise of power by pomp and ostentation. So he lists banners, flags, drums, and all signals of power. And the social distinction operates for two reasons, political and economical. Firstly, ruling emblems are legally restricted to the ruler. It will be usurpation to use a banner of the king, but also the richness, the wealth of the king is shown by gold and embroideries. They show and require an enormous wealth. And so here we come back to another term who was cited this morning, is another author, Thorstein Veblen, who examined the conspicuous consumption. And so the relationship also in this quotation, it's very Khaldunian, because there is the relationship between urban and rural, center and periphery, and the exchange between symbols and material wealth. Abdeslam Shedadi defines JA as a noisy and grandiose display of authority. But if during wartime JA is accumulated by showing courage and determination, after sedentarization, all the prestige comes down from the ruler. Hence, court becomes an arena for escalating I quote Khaldun, obsequiousness and flattery, in order to preserve a rank among elite. Sustaining the appearance of JA becomes more and more expensive, just like as it is expensive to accumulate credential for signaling in today's labor market, which is in a credentialism loop, as studied by many sociologists of education in the USA. Because since signaling is the gateway to finding a job, it engages growing expenditures as the market becomes more and more competitive. So this is a winner takes all competition. Is a term used by American economist Robert H. Frank. What it means is that the amount of resources invested in JA by every single player of court or at university is not proportional to the outcome obtained. JA is merely a proxy to obtain a rank or job, but since there is a scarcity of high-level ranks or jobs, only a small part of the players will prevail. For all the others, the investment has to be considered as a sunk cost. So a cost useless, completely useless. This is because rank is a positional asset. The term is from economist Fred Hirsch. Positional assets are structurally scarce assets, because if I have a rank, other people have another rank. We cannot have all the same rank. So it's structurally scarce. And this produce expenditure cascades, another term from Robert H. Franks. He coined the term in order to explain why consumption in the last 20 years has grown more rapidly than predicted by traditional economics models. And another interesting analogy is that he talked about mimetism, so imitation, which is a recurring subject of American sociology since the 50s. And we have the same intuition, the same insight in Ibn Khaldun, who shows the way that different classes or different ranks or different groups, social groups, different tribes imitate each other, because imitating the signs can be a way to obtain the same outcome. This is the question today, as at the times of Ibn Khaldun. But how can society keep up with such an escalation in conspicuous consumption? So expenditure cascades, private and public. Robert H. Frank considers winner-takes-all dynamics as the main cause of inequality in contemporary society. First, by attracting too many contestants, and second, by giving rise to unproductive patterns of consumption. And inequality is, above all, a source of instability, of political instability, and we find other echoes with what was said this morning. In the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun explained that the quest for prestige among the elite would necessarily degenerate into the rise of taxes, because everyone has to spend for the wealth to accumulate what I call symbolic capital to prevaricate the others. So the ruler is legitimate to raise taxes, since there is a fair exchange between goods and services provided. And this exchange can be seen at the level of the single society. Every society has a center, a periphery, or the world system economy. On a geopolitical point of view, there is an exchange, and this exchange can be more or less equal. So the trade between center and periphery as a metaphor or as a model of every kind of relation, every kind of exchange between different forms of capital is similar to what Marxist economy of development named unequal exchange, which is the exact name of the concept. That is to say, an exchange bound to structural inequalities in skills and capitalization. Desert tribes in Khaldun are dominated by the urban population. There's an exchange between, on one side, coined monies, dinars and dirhams, and work or milk, wool, materials, goods. But the rulers and the whole system of Jah ensure something more important, which is fundamental, which structurate this unequal exchange, because the center needs the wool or the milk, but the rest of society needs political order, and the rulers give this service, this good, very, very, very precious. So the periphery have, I quote Khaldun, no hope of survival except by being obedient to the city. Jah is a source of revenue for urban people because it can be exchanged with labor. But Jah is more and more expensive to accumulate as conspicuous consumption escalates. That's where the mechanism gets jammed and the interest of the subject in cultural enterprises disappears. This is another quotation from the Muqaddimah. So in the Muqaddimah, the exchange between Hadara and Badawa works until the assessment increase beyond the limits of equity. Then the whole system of Jah degenerates, because there is a trade-off, a comparison. When they compare, so people in the periphery, when they compare expenditure and taxes with their income and gain and see the little profit they make, they lose all hope. So the center requires the work of the periphery in exchange for fewer and fewer efficient services, which doesn't mean that the center is useless, but is less and less useful. So that's why, I found this term also this morning in Professor Kaminsky's presentation. So I thought it was interesting, the concept of diminishing returns in Jah, in symbolic capital, which is the subject I wanted, the hypothesis I wanted to show. the center swells until it can no longer maintain its hegemony. In Ibn Khaldun's view, the race for Jah interferes with activities related to the production of collective wealth. We could speak of a crisis of over-accumulation of symbolic capital, or as mismatch between the skill pool of individuals and the opportunities to valorize those skills. So there is no more space, no more room for all the elites, because the reproduction of the elites becomes too heavy for the society to sustain. I have 4 minutes, so I will go to the end. So this is what Goldstone, in his analysis of French Revolution and other revolution, calls an intra-elite competition. And I think we can maybe ask ourselves if phenomena like populism or illiberal democracies, I can't spell it, is not related to this intra-elite competition, which is similar to the model of the fourth generation of Ibn Khaldun. And I have some graphs, but I will pass it very fast. We have a phenomenon of diminishing returns in education, which is the field of accumulation of symbolic power, symbolic capital. Diminishing returns in what education produces as a wealth, but also in what it produces as knowledge. We have diminishing returns in government spending, so the relationship between what the government spends and the GDP realized is not in developed country, I think more of USA or Europe. I don't know in Turkey how it works, but there is a discrepancy between investment and results. We have diminishing marginal productivity of debt in US economy. We have diminishing return from investment and the old evergreen Marxian tendency of the rate of profit to fall, which is in the hypothesis of that I propose related to the intra-elite conflict, which has many effects. We have globally these economies of scales, which have been studied by management sciences, but mostly because they are related with Khaldun model. We have status conflict in groups, a very studied subject in management sciences. Credential inflation, so the relationship between credential produced by the education system and the capability of the job market to transform it to transform the investment in individual and collective wealth, and unproductive signaling expenditure. We talk about this. So what I think it can be interesting, this is my project, my way of working, but maybe can interest other people, is the way that different disciplines, by the insight of Khaldun, can be connected. So I won't list them, but in order to explain why signaling expenditure produce an alteration, a modification in the exchange, which became unequal between symbolic capital and material capital, and provoked by status conflict over the reproduction of symbolic capital. And so the idea is creating bridge between various fields, and I think today we made it, and we still continue to do it. And this proves that Ibn Khaldun is still very actual, and social sciences maybe have still to arrive where Ibn Khaldun, with a great comprehensive vision of the globality of social relationships, arrived by himself without all the literature that we have today. So I think that I will find other answer to my interrogation and my questions in the following hours and days. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafael, for this excellent presentations. And now we have, I know it's the last session and you are so tired, and please just stay with us, you know, one more presentation, and hopefully, inshallah, we will have a very hot discussion, because there are very provocative thoughts and ideas and questions through the panelists, through the presentations. And now we have our final presenters. We have Mahmoud Farhadi Mahalli from IRIB Research Center, which is located in Tehran. And also we have Masume Nasiri Purkalaya from Khwarizmi University, which is located in Tehran as well. And the title of their presentation is Power and Urban Life, Reading the Historical Changes of Tehran and Pre- and Post-1979 Tehran from the Khaldunian Perspective. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. In this section, Okay. At first, I will try to present the introduction of the article. After me, Mr. Farhadi will present the rest of article. The title of article is Power and Urban Life, Reading the Historical Changes of Tehran Before and After 1979 Revolution from the Perspective of Ibn Khaldun's Theory. In the beginning, I want to mention a sentence from Ibn Khaldun. He says that it should be noted that the truth of the history is revealing the human community and qualities that affects the nature of his community. How do cities survive growth and decline cycles? This question has occupied many minds for years, and many have sought to answer the question so that they can explain the relation between power and city life. Ibn Khaldun is one of the thinkers who have done theoretical work in this field. In order to explain the growth and decline cycles, he has presented a kind of linear evolutionary theory. But although it has been criticized, appears to have proper abilities for explaining some of the traits of the third world countries, especially the Middle East. Ibn Khaldun's approach this question from both cultural and knowledge-based perspective. According to Ibn Khaldun, all human societies have common ground in spite of cultural, social, and historical differences and diversities, so that the principle and component can be generalized to all human beings and communities. As we said, in this article, we will try to study the history of Tehran before and after the Islamic Revolution in 1979 in light of Ibn Khaldun's theory of transformation and political governance to determine the extent to which this theory can explain these changes. Cyclical evolutionary theory of Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun adopted a systematic approach to a study of society which he called Ilm al-Imran, the science of culture and society. The work has several aspects to its exposition. However, the concern of this research is the area that espouses on the span of governance and city life. To Ibn Khaldun, political administration lasts for 4 generations before it is overthrown or supplemented and replaced by a new one, which replenish and then follow the same process to apogee and then collapse. At rise and growth, governor is held together and united by what he called Asabiyyah, broadly translated as group feeling or solidarity, which is the fundamental building block which provides strength to successful origins and development of a fledgling empire or policy. Asabiyyah is a rich term which encompasses a range of meaning. Authors have generally translated it through particular expression of universal sociological notion such as public spirit, social solidarity, group cohesion, esprit de corps. Ibn Khaldun's cycle theory includes 4 generations and 5 steps. So here is before. It's not here. Yes. And mention the steps. As you see, we named the first step as conquer. In this stage, a stronger Asabiyyah has defeated the weak Asabiyyah, and new era has begun. So Asabiyyah is based on kinship, and religion is vital in maintaining a state. The second step is autocracy, where the governor takes all power into his monopoly and becomes autocratic. Solidarity gives its place to the mercenary corps and administrative system that serves the wishes and aspiration of the governor. The third step is peak power. It is a time of comfort and enjoyment of the achievement of the government. Peace becomes widespread because of the state's treasury feeling, satisfaction with the situation between the classes in spring. This stage is the era of well-being and promotion of art and crafts and flourishing and economic prosperity are the sign of this period. Degeneration is the next step. Ibn Khaldun considered the clear reason for this. The most obvious of these that the government, like many living creatures, has a definite life which, as a pass-through, will undoubtedly be the time of its decline and its extinction. Government assigned the lawless to the administration of affairs and hates and those who have good ideas for development. And the last part of this cycle theory is falling the government. Because of this satisfaction of the people and the obvious weakness of the state, the Asabiyyah, or the links and solidarity between the government and people is reduced. So stronger Asabiyyah destroyed weakened Asabiyyah and government fall. This may happen with an external attack or through a revolution or more powerful Asabiyyah. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, İBN HALDUN University, for invitation. After the theoretical basis, we want to talk about findings and methodology of our article. Our method was historical study, sources like historical documents, newspapers, newsletters, and other authentic historical sources. Books related to the city of Tehran and political changes were discussed in this article. Data collection tool was reverse questionnaire, and we have tried to collect evidence from various historical periods. So we'll go to findings. First, Tehran before 1979 Islamic Revolution. As you see in the picture, it's aerial photo of Tehran, 1834, 50 years after electing as capital. As you know, Tehran was a rural or a village that was elected. They called it Dar al-Khalafa, means the capital. As you see in the picture, it was not a city, we cannot call it a city, but it was not Bedouin. So, modernization after Iran started by Reza Shah Pahlavi. In English, you can call it the King Reza, at the same period of Turkish legendary leader Atatürk. When Reza Shah came here and visited Turkey, impressed by changes. So, when he came back to Tehran, he started the reforms in cultural and technical fields. This is the picture of this visiting. Commands for unveiling women, building University of Tehran, railroads, and are some of his ideas. From 1920 to 1942, after which the gutters and gates were destroyed, the city expanded from 4 directions and found some regular and geometric shapes. Also, building and facilities were built, like National Bank, including the National Bank of Iran found, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the country's Commander-in-Chief, the railway station, Tehran radio transmitter station, the Club of Officers, and several hospitals related to this course. But because of the Second World War, he was exiled to South Africa and died there. So his plans remained unfinished. After him, his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, continued his way. In this period, following the Tehran city policies, the city of Tehran has cultural facilities, such as cultural halls, cinemas, active theaters, and light cafes and restaurants. Small hotels in the streets of Lalezar, Shahabad, Shahreza, and Pahlavi Street. A great amusement park next to the mayor's guest house with a variety of games, open-air cinema called City Hall Coffee, and a place to move. The electric cars on Pahlavi Street were among the most attractive places to spend their leisure time. During 1954 to 1979, the city of Tehran rapidly expanded and modern buildings newly constructed. Townships and boulevards were to be built. A large urban complex called Shahristan Pahlavi was to be built in Tehran's Abbasabad hills in these years. A total of high-rise buildings and towers, such as the Lion and Sun Tower, were to be built. After construction could be turned into the largest and most advanced in Asia. Here, we want you to see these pictures. Picture 1, Tehran 1946, and picture 2, Tehran 1976. 30 years distance between these pictures. As you know, at 17th, injection of oil money into the market changed the face of Tehran. Because of the advancement of Tehran's technology, foreign tourists called Tehran the Tokyo second in Asia. In 1977, just 2 years before revolution, Tehran was named as the 11th most advanced city in terms of building and modern technology. According to the statistics of the year 1977, The population of the city amounted more than 4 million people. So these pictures can show you the volume of traffic and the changes in the manner of coverage, along with the various signs of urban life, show how extensive Tehran's changes have been in this decade. This growth, which was accompanied by the expansions of large and small industries in the outskirts of Tehran and exorbitant growth of the body of a state system, sent migrant population to Tehran. The immigrants were not living in Tehran. They had no money, and with the purchase or occupation of small plots created limited but disparate neighborhoods on the margins of external communication access, such as Karaj Road, Khorasan Road, Damavand, Permanent Housing Road. So, these cities, like Khaksefid, or you can call it white ground, now is a place for homeless addicts and one of Tehran's social problems, like Islam Shahr. The demands of this disadvantaged class became very effective in the years after, especially at the beginning of the revolution in consolidating marginal settlements and changing the city of Tehran. As Juan Alfonso Pedro, the oil minister of Venezuela, once said that the oil is evil's pay, and we all will die under it. We think that the king of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, died before this. So, increasing the quality of life with not considering the conditions and human nature and people's needs for justice, as Ibn Khaldun said, decrease the Asabiyyah, and this is not good for government. As noted, so if we want to show this, we can say that the conquer time was coronation of Reza Shah Pahlavi. The autocracy time was the coup d'etat of 1954. Peak power was cultural flourishing and urban development. And degeneration, we can see the 17th and injection of oil money into the market. And the last one, the invasion of merchants and revolution. So, as noted, the unbalanced development of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi caused a large marginal population to invade the border of Tehran. The imbalance between political space and cultural space had led various forces to cooperate to overthrow Pahlavi regime. Eventually, in 1979, the Pahlavi regime collapsed and the revolutionary took control of government. For the analysis of this area, in the language of Ibn Khaldun, it can be said that a group with a more powerful Asabiyyah could defeat the Pahlavi regime, which no longer had a powerful Asabiyyah of the past. The plans of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi's period were almost stopped by Iran's 1979 revolution and Tehran's mayor Nikbey, for the sake of disability to solve traffic, the massive bribes during responsibility, the large amount of corruption, the transfer of government bids to individuals for personal gain, the change of Tehran's master plan, the creation of market for the sale of foreign tools and machines, and so other reasons, was sentenced to death and executed on April 22, 1979. The conquest of Tehran was accompanied by the rule of Islamic rulings, in such a way that Shahr-e-No was burned down as a symbol of prostitution and corruption by revolutionary forces. This era can be called a victory period. During this period, the most important Islamic law was laid the foundation of Islamic Tehran. Examples such as burning of Shahr-e-No and the collection of alcoholic beverages and closing of gambling house, along with much other evidence, show that revolutionaries in this period tried to implement their principles and laws in the city. These pictures show most important signs of this area. I want to apologize you for showing this picture, but this is the picture that published 14 years after revolution. A burned corpse of a prostitute on the hands of revolutionary. I show this because I want you to know that when we talk about the mad people, the mad crowd, what are we talking about? So, with the start of war between Iran and Iraq, development plan of Tehran was also in trouble. In the last years of the war, Tehran witnessed a missile bombardment, which raised the need for reconstruction of the city more seriously than ever. The invasion of war-torn people from the southern parts of Iran to Tehran increased the population of Tehran. In the meantime, everything that is not on the path to ideology of revolution comes out of the experience. The street whose name has been changed, or the cinema that is closed, is examples of cleaned spaces after the 1979 revolution. The new government placed housing for the poor on the top of its plans and provided the groundwork for fulfilling one of the demands of the revolution. By this decision, the extravagance growth in all directions of the city continued to increase. And with the continuation of revolutionary plans, migration to the regions around Tehran increased. After the war between Iran and Iraq, reconstruction of Tehran under the discourse of socio-political development started. Ghulam Hossein Karbashi elected as the mayor of Tehran. Oh. As mayor of Tehran, so what are you checking? He had a powerful relation with President Rafsanjani that facilitated his works. Intellectuals in Iran say that Tehran before Karbashi was nothing, and after him is everything. Construction of highways and parks, Tehran's subway, metro, growth of urban structures, they are all samples of what Karbashi did. Karbashi had a significant impact on election of Sayyid Mohammad Khatami as the president of Iran, so he paid for this. He sentenced to prison. Here I want to say a tip. Because of Tehran's importance, all of Tehran's mayors think that management of Tehran is a way to becoming president. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf are the examples of this. The first one became succeed and the other didn't. Also, all of these mayors tried to improve urban life, but questions about the quality of urban life and civil life were raised about Tehran. Establishing cultural corridors and reviewing the map of parks were among the measures that tried to improve urban life. But in general, all of these plans could not significantly increase social exposure to one-sided participation due to one-sided participation and planning. This kind of insufficient management, along with international sanctions, had a strong impact on Tehran. Due to these changes in power patterns, Tehran has faced numerous population and environmental problems in last decade. On the basis of statistics and confirmation of member of Tehran City Council, in today's issue in Tehran included the financial crisis of the municipality, lack of a stable and secure income, excessive migration, inadequate public transport, social crisis, the existence of 550 worn-out schools and 67,000 salaried employees in the municipality. So, this is after revolution, and this is the compare between before and after revolution. For conclusion, I can say that the comparative study of the latest mayor's interview at the time of Pahlavi and member of the Tehran City Council in 2019 shows that Tehran's problems are exactly the same, so that today's problem can be repeated in the same way as previous problems. This is a sign of confirmation of Ibn Khaldun's cyclical theory. Tehran, as an example of a third world metropolis, seems to have been plunged into a circle from peak to downfall, as Ibn Khaldun's foresight predicted. In terms of Ibn Khaldun's theory, Tehran is a city which its Asabiyyah has reduced and is in danger of collapse. The city faces many problems, and participation of citizens is a way to solve problems. But the lack of social solidarity and inefficient management has delayed the resolution of this issue. The lack of social solidarity and inefficient management are two concepts that Ibn Khaldun referred to in his ideas centuries ago and attached the social bias of cities to these two concepts. Thank you. Excuse me for the...
Okay, thank you very much for your patience and attention. And now I am opening the floor for the discussions and questions. And could you please hand the microphone to first Professor Duara, maybe? Okay. Youngs first. We are losing time, make a decision. Could you please introduce yourself, who you are and what you are doing? Is it working?
Thank you so much. My name is Mustafa, and I'm from Morocco, Fez. Thanks so much for this magnificent presentations. My first questions are for Professor Abdullah al-Bayyari. So basically, in your presentation, you are doing a juxtaposition between city and text. And just I wonder, if we have this juxtaposition, is that means that there is no point of reference anymore? You know, if you are going to go to Paris, so you should read about la Cathédrale de Paris. And before going to, I don't know, to James Joyce was talking about what is now we call Great Britain or Britain. The same goes if you are talking about, for example, I don't know, here in Istanbul and other places. Is that means there is no point of reference today to understand text when it refers to city or where city it refers to the text. So there is no point of reference when you are standing to understand each other's. They become the same, the both are the same. My second question is if we consider, based on the picture that you've shown us in Egypt, this relation between suburbs and center and downtown. Can we understand the relation between suburb and downtown as we understand the relation between the context, when you are writing as a writer, when the context, its relation with the footnotes? You know, the footnote, its place where the writer, you know, expert his problems. Always he go to the footnote and tell you, if you want to go further in this area, in this idea, please go and see blah, blah, blah, and see Bob, I don't know. Do you think it's the same? Suburbs is in service of the downtown. So you may see that the housekeepers or bodyguards became from the suburbs as well as the footnote is explaining to you what is going on the context. My third question, and briefly for Professor Hibara Raouf, you're speaking about the collapse or the returning of the tribe made me or remind me really a magnificent book which is written by a French sociologist. His name is Michel Maffezoli, but unfortunately he is not very welcomed in French sociology. He's always marginalized, unfortunately. Do you think that the return of tribe, that means that we are entering to a new age, an age when modernity is not the core or the canon that we can use to understand this reality? Thanks so much, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. It was kind of pirate lecturing, actually, but that's fine. Yes, Abdullah.
Thank you for the question, first. Second, I would talk about something. When we talk about text, there's a very famous theory stated by Roland Barthes, the French philosopher, who says that there is something called the death of the writer, which means that the text lives by its own. And I don't think it applies on the city as if it's a text, simply for a reason that city is something that we live in every day. It is, as any space in the world, it is the container that every dramatic relationship with evidences and politics, the self and the other, happens within. So I cannot believe that the writer of the space is gone, simply because it affects you directly. This is the first point. Second point, there is something in criticism called the focal point, which means, let's imagine, for example, that I am telling you a story about Ibn Khaldun University or Palestine. Every text, every narrative, there is a hidden part, which means that I am telling you a story about Ibn Khaldun University, but I'm not telling you about how Ibn Khaldun's university affects my little daughter standing out there waiting for me. So there is always a kind of a focal point that you can see the narrative as a panoramic view from within. When we talk about city, we need to talk about peripheries, we want to talk about suburbs, we want to talk about the poor, the rich, the elite, the politicians, the regular daily life for people. Those are multiple focal points. But when we talk about city as a dominant, hegemonic, violent space, as what was Dr. Hiba mentioned, we are talking about only one dominant focal point. Okay, I would tell you another example from my life. Amman has two poles. In Jordan, Amman, the capital of Jordan, there are two poles, Eastern and Western. This manifestation happens in more than one Arab city. In Beirut, during the war, Eastern and Western killed each other for more than 15 years in civil war. You would find similar things in Amman. You would find similar things in Damascus. What I'm talking about in my paper is democratization of the narrative within the space in city like Cairo, like Amman. We can narrate our cities. If you are an Ammani and I am an Ammani, for example, from Amman, and from Amman, we need to exchange Amman on same ground, not with authority and one under authority. So city must contain many focal points. This is democracy when we talk about not in political way, but in a cultural way. I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Sorry. One remark. I studied in Paris, in Sorbonne, political philosophy. I went there when Sarkozy was the Minister of Interiors. He had this kind of very violent strategy against colored people. He said it, colored people in Paris. I felt all the time threatened, despite the fact that I have a visa, I am legal, because I felt that at that time that this city is not my story. I am dominated by the PowerPoint, which is the authority in this city story or the city's text. Thank you again.
Dr. Riba.
Thank you for your question. We teach Mafisoli in the university here, and there are two types of tribalism, the neo-tribalism and the new tribalism. The neo one is the renewed one, which is like tribes coming back, like when the state collapses, people actually go back to their original tribal affiliations because there are networks of solidarity. And this is happening also in terms of poverty, so not only in terms of military wars, but also in terms of increasing poverty. People fall back to whatever were solidarity groups they can depend on, especially extended families, etc. And then the new ones, which are the newly emerging postmodern nomadic affiliations of people who want to come together to do something, including even following PlayStation sort of game or something. They have these icons and sometimes they buy them. We have one of my students here has them on his desk. You know, I found an axe. So I said, what is this? And he said, this is one of the games, you know, on the PlayStation, something like that. So from the very violent supremacists to the Qaeda, to Daesh, to whatever, these are types of new tribes, affiliations that people build around an attempt to have an identity in times of liquidity in a way. And I think it's not, it would be a wrong answer to say that are we going into a postmodern age of tribalism with the pre-modern coming back? So we are back to zero in a way, because this would be adopting a notion of progress. You know, so we are slipping back in a way. It's not like that. It's not going back or forth. It's just maybe the modernist narrative itself was deceiving. I mean, tribes never disappeared, but we did not see them because the discourse of the territorial state of citizenship was just overarching. And they were there all the time. And they were there outside the city, but the city was like dominating the discourse and the image and everything. So if you look at the people in Egypt, who is represented in the media, for example? The represented ones are basically the upper middle class people with all their consumerist culture, etc. And they are the image for the citizen. It doesn't mean that the poor people do not exist, but they are invisible in a way. So I think that tribes were there all the time, but they were kept aside. Interestingly, the state, the territorial state in times of elections used the tribal networks for massive voting, for collective voting in a way. So it's just different ways of looking at reality. Definitely we are witnessing a lot of new realities that we did not witness before, this melange of identities and the asymmetry, etc. So I would be very reluctant to say this is like a fallback into pre-modern times or a move towards a postmodern time. It's like, I just think that these categories need to be revised in a way. And they're not accurate because we lived in realities that do not respond to these categories in a way.
Professor Duara, yes, please. Or Lawrence.
Professor Duara, kindly let me go first. So age before youth, or ugliness before beauty, or whatever you want to put it on. But in any case, let me make my question very brief. I was sitting here thinking, why am I so concerned about your daughter out there? And I know because I have to be short, that's why I'm concerned. But I also have daughters, that's why I know what you mean. But I was thinking of this panel and thinking, the focal point, what is left out of this? And I was thinking, what's really left out is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing 2 Egyptians, 2 Iranians, oh, I forgot the Turkish mediator, but then a Frenchman at the end. And I was thinking, what am I seeing here? What is left out? France, Paris. I'll say it out loud, France, Paris. And the reason I mention that is because earlier we had a great deal of reference to ideological state apparatus, and that comes from a French theorist. You were mentioning also a French theorist. But I'll go back to somebody to pick it on into this thing. There's somebody named Ali Shariati. Do you remember he was mentioned in the previous panel? Last time I checked, he's from France. He's from Paris. So there's this, I'm saying it out loud, there's a French bug or a French influence that's floating around here that has not been identified. And yes, it relates to Ibn Khaldun, but all of these analyses were found incredibly valuable, interesting. I never slept during one of them, but one of the things that really kept me awake was thinking, where is the external influence or the external other dimension? And that's the part I missed. That's my short question. And I am sorry about your daughter.
I'm sorry for you too.
Yes,
I
Professor
started
Duara.
missing her. Anyway, I guess when we are talking about the French effect, I'm not calling for retrieving back the right of space or the right in the city by excluding the other. I mean, a rational or justified exchange of effect and be affected by. For example, I studied, most of my studies were in English. I traveled through almost all Europe. I cannot claim that they didn't affect me, either positive or negative. They didn't build my structure of knowledge and epistemological structure, but at least I need to have not dualities, because simply we are not living in dualities. That's why I started my speech by talking about that I have an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary point of view simply because when you are talking about any manifestation, you need to decode it from within and affected by the outside, but not from the outside and neglecting the from within. So cities as text, it's directly affected by the other. Yes, very true. Egypt, for example, downtown Egypt, when you look when you look to the architecture and the buildings, it's all English and French architecture. Why? Because it's directly related to the colonial era. But at the same time, revolution started there. I need to relate between those 2 points within the text from within, not from outside. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Professor Guara.
Thank you. Some very interesting talks. But for me, what was missing actually most of the time is an understanding of religion. As everybody seems to be avoiding it in some ways, either treating it instrumentally or as nationalization or this, that, and the other. So I want to ask the question, and I think from what I've read of Ibn Khaldun, he also tends often towards an instrumental and a transcendent dimension that he doesn't go into. But so I was very struck by Heba's, Professor Ezat's comment that later Asabiyyah becomes faith, right? Which is the nationalization of faith. Now, can we also, you would not say that faith becomes Asabiyyah, because that would mean that there is nothing left of faith beyond its nationalization. And to relate it to the Iran talks, where I also didn't hear anything about religion. And I think the transcendent element, and this is often sort of not referred to, right? And it's our modern sensibility. But certainly the Iranian Revolution had a very strong component. You could say it was an institutional base, or you could say, I've read Jalal al-Imad and so on, which is quasi-instrumental and not, and so on. So how would you describe religion in these terms, in both of your analyses?
Dr. Hiba?
Yes, I surely can say that faith can become Asabiyyah. At the end of the day, we have the Wahhabi example. To a great extent, the Muslim Brothers example, when a specific group is adhering to a notion of Islam, that becomes almost like tribalism. So we had these examples, but of course we cannot compare the Muslim Brothers to the Saudis. It's a different story, but there are bits and pieces of that here and there. Yes, it can happen. And I think that the understanding of Ibn Khaldun that any Asabiyyah needs, actually he didn't say it, but it actually needs to be tamed. لابد من وازع. At the end of the day, Asabiyyah can become extremely violent unless it has a moral sort of frame for it, and this is provided by faith and he was talking basically about the Arabs. He thought that this is part of the culture, that unless they have this taming effect and this disciplinary effect of religion, it would go out of control. And as I said, yes, I agree also that faith can become Asabiyyah when people close down the ability to see it as a window of dialogue and conversation, and they just stick to one version without wanting to see any other version. It can be. It's. This sort of dynamic nature of faith needs to be studied, because we usually study faith as system. Well, it has the systemic dimension, but it's also, there is I don't want to say liquid so that we wouldn't go to postmodern, but it's like this sort of, you understand what I mean, spiritual. Farabi thinks yes. He thinks that we can slip into many things and then come back. He didn't see things as a city can become immoral and then there can be islah. So I think it can. What I think is difficult to recapture, this needs to be deeply thought. is when religious and social capital on the individual level turns into political capital. And then there is no way back. Yeah, you are dead. You know, if you mess things up, go stay home. You cannot go back to the social anymore, assuming a moral capital can be recaptured again. This is what we all the time told the Muslim fellow activists. You know, if you want to do it this way, please, don't bring imams, put them in the parliament. You know, just leave them in the mosques, please. Yani, because they're doing a great job. Once he is in the parliament, he will be accountable as anyone else, and he would lose his good capital of the knowledge that he has in that public policy nonsense, you know, debates that he does not know much about. And we saw a lot of mess. So I think that minding the nature and the logic of every space is very important. But this sweeping totalitarian sort of perspective, totality, not totalitarian in the authoritarian sense, is actually very wrong. And it's one of the, interestingly, modern dimensions that were adopted by people of religion. So, people of religion. So it actually modernized religion in a very negative way. It was not a positive shift. Yeah.
Yes, please. Can you just click on it? Yes, it's on.
Yes, you're right. I agree with you that Islamic Revolution, as we said, yes, I had this problem over there.
Speak loudly.
I agree with you. When we call that Islamic Revolution, it means that religion has a great impact on revolution. So I think that it would be another paper if we only focus on the role of religion and Asabiyyah. It would be another paper, and I'm so glad that you noticed this to me. I will work on it.
Okay, one more question from the audience. Yes, please.
My question is to Professor Rafael. Thank you for your presentation. The terms of symbolic power and social capital and social cultural capital emphasizes the inequalities in society, right? And as far as I know, in the understanding of İBN Haldun's theory, it's like a circle, it's not hierarchical, right? So how can we understand? Is the Bedevi society, is the Hadari society is superior than the Bedevi one? Or what I'm saying is the terms like symbolic power, cultural capital, and social capital are emphasizes the inequalities and the hierarchy in a society, right? And in İBN Haldun's understanding, one of his sayings, he's saying the states are born and grows up and dies like human beings. And in his understanding, do you think Bedevi society, the Hadari society is superior than the Bedevi society?
Which society, excuse me?
The Hadari,
okay.
you know, the urban society is higher than the rural one. Do you think like that?
I'm not sure.
Is there a hierarchical relationship between, you know, Hadari and Badawi societies, or, you know, the city and the rural? Do you see as that right?
Yes.
Am I
okay?
Yes.
Am I transferring?
Then how can we understanding the circular understanding of İBN Haldun?
Actually, I think maybe Ibn Khaldun expert can answer about what really Ibn Khaldun means. I think that the problem is not the hierarchy. The fact is that there is a balance. So the society in its whole, the relation with Hadara Badawa, needs all the contribution. The contribution of Jad. This is also, there was a question this morning about luxury. So the question, there was a full intervention about how luxury was bad, and someone asked that it can also be good. And I simplify, and I think what the force of the insight of Ibn Khaldun is, in this sense, not to have a moralistic. It's moral, but not moralistic. I don't know if the nuance is it's clear in English, because the cycle is that you need the accumulation of capital, symbolic capital. You need luxury. Luxury is fundamental. Is a dispositive, as Foucault says, which permits society to work, which permits Asabiyyah, because all the things are connected by by prestige, by this mechanism. But there is a switch at one time when over-accumulation, you have a negative feedback on this. And so I think what is strong is that there is a moral view about the decadence of society when too much luxury is spent. Is a moral view, but it's not moralistic, because there is a positive effect of luxury and all the symbolic production. The court is necessary to the equilibrium of the relationship between Adara and Badawa. I hope I have answered to the question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have to finish now. And thank you very much for your patience and attention. And please feel free to get in touch with scholars, and they are around for 2 days. And you shouldn't miss that chance to ask questions, your further questions on diverse subjects which we don't have time to cover all of them. Thank you very much, and see you inshallah tomorrow in 9:30 morning session.